Well, good morning, everyone. It is so great to have you here. Those of you listening and those of you watching, welcome to another episode of Rethinking Freedom. I am your host, Aya Fubara Eneli. And of course, this is not just a show, this is where we actively rethink what freedom means to us, and more importantly, what we are willing to do to bring about the freedom that we say we want. And every week, it is our goal to bring you guests and to bring you topics that challenge your thinking, that get you stimulated and motivated to examine whether you're really living the life you want or whether it's time to make change and what that change would look like. And today is no different. We are going to start off with two amazing guests whom you can already see if you're on the YouTube side of it. And then once we're done interviewing our guests, we're also going to talk about some events that have been taking place in our country and across the world, because this past week we had world leaders converge in New York City for the United Nations Summit. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the speeches that we heard and then the issues that came to the forefront, and even some of those who were not granted visas and could not make it into the country. So let us start off with our two guests. I'm encouraging everyone, which you should always do when you're watching the show, although I know some of you watch and listen as you are driving. Hopefully listen, not watch. You listen while you're driving to work, but you want to get your pen and paper out, or maybe your phone and record, since that's the technology that we have today. Because what our two guests are about to share with us will change the lives of some young people. And I guarantee that. I guarantee it because I know that some of what they're about to share, I was exposed to as a young woman, and it definitely was life transformative. So I'm going to start off first by welcoming Jesse Myles. He is a dynamic force in Central Texas, a U.S. Army veteran turned real estate mogul. No easy feat. He's an entrepreneur, and he was recently elected city councilman in Harker Heights. With a mission to move, thrive, and grow his community, Jesse leads with vision, grit, and strategy. He's the CEO of the Myles Group, a top producing real estate team built on Keller Williams' MREA model, and the founder of Summit Valor Homes, a veteran inspired construction brand, all while raising the bar in local politics. Known for his bold leadership, big picture thinking, and boots on the ground impact, Jesse blends service driven values with tech powered systems to create real results. Whether he's helping families find homes, mentoring young leaders, or launching citywide initiatives, Jesse shows up with passion and with purpose, and he makes it happen. Welcome to Rethinking Freedom, Jesse Myles.
No, thank you. Thank you for the introduction there.
You are so
Oh,
welcome. And I can tell you all that I was able to just this past Monday spend some time with him at an event that we had in our community, and he lives up to every single word of that. Our second guest with us today is Jan Lee. Jan was born and raised in the Philippines and has proudly called Austin, Texas home for over 20 years. As the founder of Jan Lee Homes and a top 10% agent at Keller Williams MC1, she's guided families for more than a decade through buying, selling, and investing in real estate. Her clients appreciate her soft yet direct approach, honest advice, no sugarcoating, and a genuine commitment to helping them succeed. Her mission goes beyond real estate, and you're going to hear that tonight, this morning. In 2017, she had to rebuild her life from scratch with nothing but 5 trash bags and a vision. You know, it's one thing to listen to someone who was born with a silver spoon, always had everything at their fingertips, and then is a success. It's another thing when you listen to someone who knows what it is to start with what looks like nothing and then goes on to have such a huge impact. So really looking forward to what you have to share with us. What changed everything for her were mentors, systems, tools, models, faith, and teaching Quantum Leap, a program designed to help others think bigger, break through limitations, and step into their next chapter. And now, not only has she stepped into her next chapter, she's going to be helping a lot of people who are willing to step into theirs as well. When she's not serving clients or leading workshops, you'll often find her with her husband and children out on a nature walk, exploring Austin's food scene, playing pickleball, or cheering for the Dallas Cowboys. Jan, you have not had much to cheer for in quite some time. I am not a Cowboys fan, and I'm always happy when you all can cheer. So I know you have not had much to cheer for when it comes to that. She believes success isn't luck, it's a choice, and you don't need to be fearless. You just need the next step. Jesse and Jan, thank you for joining Rethinking Freedom.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much. You just gave Jesse a reason to really smile today, so that's good. I'm glad. His smile was so big.
Jesse, you don't like the Cowboys either?
Oh no! Oh, Jan knows that. Her and my wife, they're Cowboy fans, and we have our own inner rivalry with each other about the stupid Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm driving by, I see those billboards. What about them Cowboys? I'm like, yeah, what about them? Okay. On to the important things. So I understand that both of you, and also with JJ, who's not able to be with us today, JJ Tolentino, you have a program coming up in Central Texas that the people should know about. Jesse, you want to get us started? What is this program?
Okay. First, I want to start off by saying, I truly believe that leadership starts young, and that when you give the people the right tools, the mindset, and the mentorship, they can build powerful futures, not just for themselves, but for our entire community. And that's kind of why I want to bring Quantum Leap to Hartford Heights. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview over it, and Jan, she can go more in depth on it. But Quantum Leap, I've taken it before, a long time ago. I'm that old. But Quantum Leap is a one-day leadership experience that is designed specifically for young people. Our target market is between the ages of 16 and 23. And believe it or not, it's not going to be a lecture. It's more interactive. It's an interactive workshop. And they're going to dive into powerful questions like, who am I? What do I want my life to be about? And most importantly, how do I fund the mission so I can like really live? And pretty much they're gonna walk away with clarity, and a real vision board and a life model to structure their time and their decisions. And the most important thing is going to give them the confidence to pursue, so they can pursue something bigger than themselves. Would you agree, Jan?
Yes, absolutely. The quantum leap is really going to open their mind into what is possible, and also what are the things right now that they may be believing based on what others have told them about. And it's just going to open their mind into a different way of thinking, a different way of looking at life. And the one thing that is I'm excited about for Quantum Leap is that we will guide them on creating their personal mission in life. So once you have your personal mission in life, regardless of how old you are, then you can make decisions for your future based on whether or not that decision is going to support your mission.
Wow. So you've said a lot right now. As someone, I practice law, and what I see time and time again are just people who are in tough situations due to choices they made. And a
Right.
lot of times it's not just thinking ahead, just not having a plan for their lives, just falling into things around them, as opposed to, hey, wait a second, I have a purpose and I know the tools that I need to be able to achieve that purpose. Because a lot of people have dreams, but then it's how do you actuate it? So tell us more about what this program entails, and like, when did it start? Who originated this program? Why do you believe in it so much?
So Quantum Leap started back in 1990s. The founder of Keller Williams Realty, Gary Keller, had mastermind with his top agents, and they would ask him like questions about the market, questions about life in general. And Gary is like, he likes to write and draw things. So he was drawing things on the board and illustrating to people how he think about life. And then he also had notes. So he put all his notes together. And one day he was invited to a Keller Williams conference and he didn't know what he was going to talk about. So he went back to his notes and he had a big moment where he realized that everything that he was telling people is actually the way he lived his life. And that led him to right now with Jesse, myself, and JJ, we 185,000 agents across the country, across the even the world, just being able to help other people based on his the way he lived his life. He calls it his journey that he's sharing, and out of that also is the foundation that is going to provide scholarship to children ages 16 to 23, and if they qualify for it, they can use it towards their education. And I just want to take a moment to actually thank Jesse for bringing us over, because this is one of our passion too, is to touch the lives of young generations. Like we've mentioned, I'm from the Philippines. I really didn't have any father figure, I didn't have any mother figure, and I had a mom. However, she wasn't really there as a mother. And being able to discover Quantum Leap, I have a passion for being the big sister for our young generations, so they know, at least they'll have a guidance.
That is powerful. So when is this event? When is the event taking place in Harker Heights?
The event's going to be October 25th. That's a Saturday. It's going to be
Okay.
at the Harker Heights Library Activity Center from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's completely free. Well, I'm going to have lunch. I'm working on getting a breakfast sponsor right now. Um, it's going to be full of mentors who are committed to helping the next generation win.
Wait a second. So you are putting on a program for our community, for our young people, that challenges them. They walk out with a better understanding of who they are, with the tools that they need to be successful, really honing in on their purpose, getting away from the TikTok and all of that for a minute to think about their own lives. It's free. You're providing food for them. And as a parent, did I hear you say scholarship?
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
can you talk more about that? We have 5 children. 3 of them are in college right now. My love language right now is scholarship.
Yes. And one thing about the
Yes.
scholarship, because the scholarship's
Yeah.
not tied to any school.
Mm-mm.
So if someone came and they were able to meet the, whatever the criteria is for the scholarship, and let's say they wanted to go into plumbing or into becoming an electrician, or they want to go on to get a 4-year degree, any of those things, that scholarship can go with them.
Towards their education. So if they're educating themselves to be a plumber or
Yes.
to be anything that they feel they have a passion for, then yes. If so, we will teach them how to create goals.
Okay.
After they created their mission, Then
Mhm.
we're going to teach them how to create goals so they can move closer to their mission. And
Mhm.
then once that's done, they can apply for coaching. So they will be coached for, I believe, 6 months by successful business owners. And
They have
they're going
volunteers.
to, right, they volunteer their time. And I pay $1,000 for these coaches
Oh no,
a
I'm a
month.
coach.
Yeah,
I'm a coach and
exactly.
I have a coach. I know how expensive it can be.
Yeah, yeah. So they're gonna get that for free, and they're going to like guide them through their goals and how to create that, and then they can apply for that. And then once that's done, then they can go ahead and apply for the scholarship, and then the coach is most likely going to give them recommendations.
Wow. This is powerful. So, where do people go to get more information? How do they sign up? Because I know that right now I'm thinking my junior in high school, he's going to be there. I don't care if I'm dragging him in there. And I'm thinking I might have to go pick up the one who's at Prairie View University and bring him down as well. Because really, what you're providing, people don't understand until they have to go pay for it. This is invaluable. And
Oh,
some
yeah, and that's
people never have access to things like this. And so, everyone listening, you definitely want to take advantage of this. So, how do they get more information and how do they sign up?
there's an Eventbrite page that's set up. I guess we can drop it into your YouTube, but
Yes.
also
Do that.
if you go to Jesse Myles for Harker Heights on my Facebook, you'll see a link to the Eventbrite page that you can go on there.
Okay. So for those of you who are listening, you can still come to the Rethinking Freedom YouTube channel. And in the description for today's program, you will see a link so that you can go and fill this out. And I will just caution people, sometimes we have good intentions. I'm going to get to it, but then you procrastinate. And then the next thing you forget. And then the next thing you're hearing about, oh, it's already over. So this is one that I would tell you, run, don't walk. Get your young person signed up. If you're within this age range, get yourself signed up as well. Take advantage of these kind of opportunities because Jesse and Jan, I know you don't have to do this. You don't have to take time out of your schedule to do this, like you don't have anything else to do. But they what they are showing us, they're demonstrating the hearts of true servant leaders is that you don't just get yours and say, well, I'm doing fine and to hell with the rest of you. You actually figure out how to make your community better. And I thank you for your leadership. Thank you. Any last words, any last things you would like to let our viewers know?
The only last thing I would say is that I do have a 20-year-old. She's going to be 21. But when she was 19, I drag her to a class. Actually, I bribe her. You know, every time she wants her nails done, I was like, remember that class? Eventually, she got to the class. At the first time that she was there, it was actually, she was like very reserved and wasn't very open with this information. And then I dragged her again a second time. And the second time, she was actually more like open to it. And one morning, she was thinking about a business idea. And by the morning, she had her business plan entirely written. And she knows exactly what she needed to do. So, you know, I think that many of us people that actually reach or like hear about this program at 40, I'm like 40 something, and wish that we had this information when we were younger. And so
Yeah.
that's yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. I just wanted to remind it, like this isn't just another event. It's really about planting the seeds that change lives. Um, and we're not waiting on a system to really save our kids. We want to build something for them right here and right now. And you know, let me put my councilman hat on. And in my opinion, this is how we build a better Harker Heights, a better Central Texas. You know, so if you're a parent, an educator, or even a mentor, um, you know, if you know somebody that just, you know, they're, I don't want to say wandering aimlessly, but you know, just this right here will give them that oomph, hopefully give them that, to where, they can achieve success in their lives and help them feel like a little bit unstuck.
And
Thank you.
have the freedom, sorry, and have the freedom, the freedom of thinking. It really is about freedom of thinking, because once you know about these things, you are able to think really purposely about your life, and you're not being like bombarded with the things that you hear and see everywhere else right now.
That are not working for you. Jan, you
Correct.
brought up something that I think I want to emphasize with parents, guardians, grandparents. I believe the research shows that a human being's brain is not fully developed until they're about 26 years old. So often I hear parents say, well, I told my child, but they didn't want to go. In my experience as a parent, sometimes I've bribed. Yes, no shame in my game. Sometimes I've dragged them. Sometimes I've taken them, gotten them there under false pretenses. It's like whatever it takes to get them in front of people and opportunities. And for some people, it's not the first time you hear something. For most of us, I mean, in marketing, they say people have to like see the same thing 7 times before they take
I was gonna
action.
say 8, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So even if you say, oh, I took my child to this conference before, I've taken them here before, they've heard this stuff before. No, like you never stop. And I can tell you that my older children right now, in the successes that they've seen, they'll come back and say, oh, mom, thank you for taking them to a place where they were upset. They walked in like this, attitudes, all of that, but still something was penetrating. And now, months, years later, they are seeing the value of what they received. So don't wait for a 16, 17, 20, 22-year-old to tell you whether they feel like it. I know they think they're grown and all of that. Use whatever persuasive skills you have to get your young people here, because the worst thing that can happen is they choose not to be open and they don't receive that day. But think of what could happen if they are open. And think of the opportunity of not just understanding. Many of the adults listening today, you're not clear on your purpose. You're not clear on your goals. You're not clear on a pathway to achieve your goals. So imagine giving that to a young person, and then they have mentors to coach them, and all of this for free. Get your young people out there and like and subscribe and share, even if it's just this portion of the episode today. Share with as many young people as possible. Let's pack the room. Let it be where they have to turn people away and create a second day or something, because it is that important. Jesse and Jan, I want to thank you for joining Rethinking Freedom. You are welcome to come back anytime. And thank you so much for what you're doing for our community.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you too.
You're so welcome. All right. So, and we will be back as we continue the rest of the show. Well, as promised, we go on to the second part of our episode today. And our focus is on the meeting that just took place in New York City, the United Nations General Assembly. It was the 80th session of the Assembly. And the theme is Better Together, 80 Years and More for Peace, Development, and Human Rights. Now, as I listened to that theme, it seems to me that it's not just an invitation, right, for more peace, for development, and for human rights. There's also a veiled warning embedded in those words. In other words, if we don't do the things that we need to do right now, we might indeed be creating more war, creating less development, which will have a ripple effect, and definitely eroding human rights. So just a quick history of the United Nations and the theme. Today, I'm going to focus on the voices from what is generally called the Global South. These would be the countries that are not sitting on the United Nations Security Council and who make up the majority of the nations who are part of the United Nations, and who largely feel like they are not given a voice at the table. They are acted upon as opposed to being part of the entity that makes the decisions and enforces them. And this is supposed to be an organization that is bringing about world peace. And so before I go any further, I want you to hear a snippet of what some of the leaders had to share this past week as they took the podium to express their concerns about their nations, the world as a whole, and the role the United Nations is playing. Listen.
How can one state, a member of this august body, act with such impunity against defenseless men, women, and children? Surely, the hottest part of hell is reserved for those perpetrators of genocide and those who are complicit in it.
There cannot be business as usual in the face of genocide. As Navi Pillar has made clear, to do nothing is not neutrality, it is complicity. But no crime, however heinous, can justify genocide. We also need to recognize the crimes being perpetrated in the West Bank, the scale and pace of appropriation of Palestinian land by illegal Israeli settlers, the open backing this receives from the Israeli government, the harassment, imprisonment, and abuse of the Palestinian population, the withholding of tax revenues from the Palestinian Authority. It must not be allowed to continue.
These atrocities must stop now. We cannot allow the further killing of thousands of innocent people, babies, children, youth, the elderly, and the frail to continue and turn our heads the other way because of improper consideration.
And as it relates to Gaza, yes, there must be a release of the hostages taken on October 7th. But we have now gone to a point where all of our human sensibilities are offended by the continuous and disproportionate attacks on the Palestinian people and the failure to allow access by the international community to the survivors for the provision of humanitarian aid.
Wow. So if you're like me, so some fiery words for sure. Essentially, we are hearing from a number of countries. I'm just going to name a few: Mexico and Colombia. I didn't actually play the clip from the Colombian president, from Malta, from Ghana, South Africa, Namibia, of course, Barbados, Mia Mottley, who I believe if she was the leader of the entire universe, we would be living in a much better place. Nigeria, Brazil, all of these nations had something in common, and that is that they were all calling for a reset. Even Ireland was calling for a reset as well. They were talking about what this means for development, for climate change, for girl and women's rights, for understanding how we can actually create a world where everybody thrives, not just a select few at the expense of everybody else. So a little bit about the history of the United Nations for those of you who have never bothered to pay attention to this organization. The UN rose from the ruins of World War II with a promise to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war by creating a place where nations argue with words and not weapons, where they come together and every voice is heeded and decisions are made for the collective good. However, over 8 decades, that is not exactly what has happened, although I will speak to some of the successes of the United Nations. What many of the leaders brought up was the fact that the infrastructure in place, the very structure of the United Nations today in 2025, is still largely what it looked like in 1945, where you had a group of colonial powers and they just like ruled over the rest of the world. including the fact that nations on the United Nations Security Council have what is called a veto power. And so even if the entire assembly, all of the nations, vote and the vast majority agree on a course of action, just one member of the United Nations Security Council can veto it, and there's no way to overcome that veto. So as you can imagine, some of these world powers have over the years, over the decades, basically exercised that veto right. I would say abused that veto right, and have basically vetoed anything that is not in keeping with what they think personally serves them or their nations. So the issue with Palestine is an example where the United Nations has decided, finally, after years and after the petition that was submitted by South Africa, that yes, there's indeed a genocide taking place in Gaza, and yet a country like a country like the United States of America can unilaterally veto and no action then taken by the United Nations. But let's talk about some of the successes of the United Nations. And then we're going to talk about why you should care, because this show is primarily aired in the United States. And sometimes we can be so myopic in our thinking. We really do believe in American exceptionalism. We really do believe that the sun rises and sets in the United States of America. Of course, people in the previous United Kingdom felt that way as well, given their vast empires. But we're not really paying attention to the fact that climate and other issues have no regard for our so-called borders. Some of you may recall when there were these fires, forest fires burning in Canada, and so many cities in the United States of America were impacted by that smoke. Of course, when we talk about climate change, what we do in the quote unquote West in terms of how we consume fossil fuels and the rest of it impact what's happening in the global South. And a lot of times they're bearing the brunt for the misuse and the conspicuous consumption of the West, if you will. But some of the good that the United Nations has been able to do, they've helped eradicate smallpox across the world. Now, of course, if our RFK Jr., who says he has a worm in his brain, and yet I shouldn't say they voted to accept his nomination as the Secretary of Health in the United States, who says taking drugs actually helped him do better. And I'm talking about illicit drugs, academically helped him do better academically. If we're to follow his path, we would get rid of all vaccines, and we might see a return of smallpox here in the United States of America. But in addition to helping to eradicate smallpox across the world, the United Nations has also helped to feed millions through the World Food Program. They've written the laws of the sea and space, and they've really helped combat and prevent other wars, right? But what we also see is a situation where power politics has outpaced the UN's rules and their resources, right? And so what we're seeing is kind of a triple bind: war and occupation, testing the rules-based order. And we see that happening with Ukraine. We see that happening in Gaza. And of course, we see that happening in Sudan. And we're not talking enough about Sudan or what's happening in the Congo either. We see this issue in terms of debt and development crisis that block climate change and trap countries in austerity, basically in poverty. So at the end of World War II, there was a Marshall Plan. There was a plan to rebuild Europe because there was an understanding that after all that devastation, there had to be an infusion of cash, not a loan, that would allow the nations to rebuild. We saw that with the reparations that were paid to survivors of the Jewish Holocaust. But what has not happened in the vast majority of the global South, that has been devastated by slavery and colonialism and now neocolonialism is that there has been no relief given to these countries that is not tied to debt. And so if you're already in a hole and you have to borrow at rates that disadvantage them. So think about it here in the United States. The more money you have, the easier it is for you to get a loan, right? And the better the rates are for you to borrow, even though you are clearly exhibiting that you don't need the money, right? Because you have all these resources that you lay claim to. And yet the person who needs the resources the most, the poorest person, ends up being charged with the highest interest rates. And so these are the things that are happening globally as well. And then, of course, the third issue that they all raised is the distrust of institutions, from the Security Council's veto rights, which I've talked to you about already, to how money flows from the World Bank and the IMF, who makes those decisions, and the manner in which certain countries basically bully the smaller countries or bully those countries that do not have nuclear weapons, right? So Better Together asks, can we modernize cooperation fast enough to keep the promise of freedom? Freedom to live. We're talking about fiscal safety, food, climate, right? Freedom under law, equal rules for all. And the Colombian president was particularly articulate on this issue when he raised the fact that the United States of America has been serving as judge, jury, and executioner when they spotted boats at sea in the Caribbean and have decided these are drug smuggling boats. And so not capturing them, not having a trial, but just bombing them and murdering everybody on the boats with no proof provided that they are indeed guilty of whatever they're being charged with. So do we have equal rules for all? And then will we have the freedom to shape the future? So Mia Motley from Barbados in particular talked about technology and so-called artificial intelligence, which is actually being molded to continue to perpetuate issues of discrimination against women, against Black people. Because, you know, we call it artificial intelligence, but it's not that artificial. There are people creating writing the codes for it, right? Creating what the algorithms are, and actually putting out disinformation through AI and through other means of technology. And so they also talked about the dark web. So when leaders are talking about reset, they're not just talking about slogans. And you just heard about the program that's going to be happening in Harker Heights about the Quantum Leap workshop. That too is calling for a reset, but that is on an individual and personal level, is to come into a room and learn tools and acquire skills to be able to reset so you can create the individual freedom that you seek. But within that, we also need to be looking at what is happening across the world and how we reset, the United Nations resets in order to bring about the changes that we want to see. So some of the issues that they are raising, they want reform in the United Nations, expanding representation, especially African seats on the Security Council, and veto restraint in mass atrocity situations. And I believe it was the president of Ghana who spoke so eloquently, and he raised the point that by 2030, over a quarter of all human beings on the face of the earth will be on the continent of Africa, and Africa will have the youngest population. And so he said to applause that Africa is the future. Some people may not want to hear that, especially those who are racist, those who feel like there should always be an imbalance of power so that they can lord it over others. They talked about financial architecture reform, cheaper capital for developing countries, debt relief, SDR rechanneling, and the reformation of multilateral development banks to unlock climate and development financing. And so, again, Mia Motley talked about the Barbados Bridgetown Initiative. And I'm giving you this information so you can go back and Google and research. And if you go on the UN website, you can see all these speeches. They're also on YouTube. Ignorance is not bliss. It is so much easier to control an ignorant, uneducated, uninformed people. So it is our quest here on Rethinking Freedom to bring you information that gets your brain whirling and you thinking and going past maybe what you learned and the things that were left out of the lessons that you have been exposed to. Of course, they talked about accountability in Gaza and elsewhere. All of these countries calling for a ceasefire, calling for protection of civilians. They're not condoning the actions of Hamas, but they're saying that what has happened in Gaza, what happened on October 7th, does not warrant the genocide that we're seeing and that we're all watching, unfortunately, in real time. And by the way, you can Google the number of health workers who've been killed intentionally. You can Google the number of journalists who've been killed so that the stories are not really told about the atrocities happening in Gaza. And of course, the land grab that is occurring as Palestinians are being pushed out of the West Bank, pushed away from their homelands, and displaced. They talked about gender equality as a core stability and reminded everyone about the Beijing Conference Assembly, which was 30 years ago, and that the progress that was supposedly being done for women and girls to have equity seems to have stalled and in some places even reversed. We're certainly seeing it in some of the language being thrown around in the United States of America, requiring women who may have changed their names due to marriage to jump through extra hoops to be able to vote, telling young women that their job is to get pregnant and stay home and be subservient to their husbands. Yes, these are now things that are being openly talked about and touted as what's best for women. And of course, in the United States of America, we still have never elected a woman to the top position in the country as president of the country. By tradition, Brazil opens the general debate, and President Lula da Silva was unequivocal on Gaza. He said, and I quote, "Nothing, absolutely nothing justifies the ongoing genocide in Gaza." He said tens and tens of thousands of women and children are lying under rubble, and there is no excuse for it. And the point he was also making is that with the United States of America's complicity in this genocide, to the extent that our country has not been able to condemn the actions of Netanyahu, that under that rubble is also buried the concept that many other countries had bought into of America's exceptionalism, of America being about democracy and freedom. Because if we truly were, we would not be sanctioning a genocide. Some other key asks from Brazil were to respect international humanitarian law consistently, to re-energize multilateralism against unilateral coercive measures. And we know that the felon-in-chief sitting in Washington, D.C. has been using the power of the quote-unquote tariff to try and break the backs of smaller countries and to force their leaders into compromises and agreements that are not in the best interest of their people, really not of us as the United States of America and not the world. I think something that we should understand is that most people who migrate from their countries to another country are not leaving because they hate their countries and they don't want to thrive in their countries. They are leaving, many of them, for quote unquote greener pastures. And so if you're someone who's a proponent for doing away with immigration and we don't want anybody crossing our borders and coming in, then it's actually in our best interest to stop interfering negatively in the sovereignty of other nations, to stop being that bully that extracts but adds no value, to stop creating situations in those countries that bring about war and instability that cause them to become poorer. Because when they are destabilized, that is when you see more people fleeing from those nations, looking for a place where they can have some peace and thrive. And by the way, so would you. By God's grace, we will not experience war in the way many other places are, or the impact of climate change. But should we, you will find people migrating as well. How many of you have moved from where your family lived to a different city or a state because you had a better job opportunity, right? So you understand that concept, what drives people to move. Of course, Mexico also talked about support for a two-state solution, and so did many other countries who are now coming out and recognizing Palestine, including Canada, right? Colombia's president talked about this war on drugs and was making the point that attacking and killing people will never stop the war on drugs. He made the point that you have to look at what's driving the consumption of drugs. And then you also have to understand what drives people to sell drugs as a way to make an income, particularly the poor people. And that if you created other means for people to live and to make a livable income, they would not rely on these other methods. But he also pointed out that while young peasants are being bombed and murdered at sea, or in the case of the United States, picked up on street corners and locked up for years and years, the actual drug lords are living in mansions all over the United States of America and in other places and enjoying a very high quality of life, and they are being protected. Petro linked, and Petro is the president of Colombia, he linked climate justice to peace. You make the right changes with climate, you fight back against desertification, and we will see more peace. We will see less people getting into the drug trade, if you will, people being able to make a living doing something that is honest and helpful, and definitely a reduction in so-called immigration. The president of South Africa said, we are building weapons when we should be building social infrastructure. In the United States of America, we are funding ICE when we should be funding social programs to help communities build and thrive, when we should be funding infrastructure, right? And so there's a need to take a look at these double standards and to ensure that the law applies equally to everyone, but that we are putting resources in places that can actually make a difference. And there were so many more that I cannot cover all in the few minutes that we have. We did hear from a number of women, including Namibia's new president, Netumbo Nandi Ndaitawa. She's the country's first woman head of state. And this was her quote unquote maiden United Nations General Assembly address. And she too underscored governance reforms, youth opportunity, and fair benefit sharing from natural resources. Many of the African leaders talked about being rich in minerals and resources, and whether it's other nations or multinational corporations coming in, extracting these resources, adding virtually no value to the communities that they're extracting from, and then turning back and selling the finished products back to the people at much higher prices than what they paid to extract the minerals in the first place. So any of us using a cell phone, all of the technology that we're using, the uranium and cobalt, all of that is coming from the continent of Africa. And yet we dare to call Africa the poorest continent. And it's really because of the vestiges of colonialism, ongoing racism, and neocolonialism. And Malta's Prime Minister, Roberto Abela, said, tear down these walls, stop building barriers, start rebuilding cooperation, and announce the formal recognition of the state of Palestine. Now, you would have to contrast all of this with the words that came from the President of the United States of America, whom I call the felon in chief. This is a man who's been convicted of 34 felons, an adjudicated sexual assaulter, with so many others who've also accused him of assault, who is refusing to release the Epstein files and twisting arms to make sure that the truth doesn't come out about, I guess, his role in that pedophile ring. Because otherwise, sir, why are you fighting so hard not to release these files? Contrast what other leaders are saying with what he was saying. And those of us living in America should be very concerned, because what America is doing is isolating itself. He was the only one saying climate change is a hoax. He was the only one saying, well, whining and complaining about everything, basically undermining the United Nations and refusing to cooperate with other leaders, because he's just going to be that bully on the playground that won't stop until everybody else finally finds the courage to stand up and fight back. Mia Motley, when she spoke, she brought up Cuba. Some of you may pronounce it as Cuba, and said that the embargo against Cuba is unjust and must stop. Cuba is not a terrorist state and should no longer be punished in the way that it has been. She quoted a poem with these words let me say these words first and then the poem. She says, in the absence of truth, trust suffers. And we know that one of the things the felon in chief is notorious for is lying about everything. This man actually stood in front of the leaders of the world and claimed that he has unilaterally stopped 7 wars, which is a blatant lie. But this was a sentence that she quoted from a poem. They plunder, they make it desert, and they call it peace. They plunder, they make it desert, and they call it peace. So, as we in America are fixated on what's going on here, for those of us who are even paying attention, we have looming a possible government shutdown if our leaders are not able to come together and work out a compromise. And the felon in chief is saying, I'm not compromising. I do not have to speak to the other party. In fact, labeling Democrats as enemies. Not my words, his words. Some other information that I wanted to share, talking about freedom from gender-based violence, freedom to lead, and freedom to benefit from climate development finance. They spoke specifically about how women are suffering, women and children in the genocide in Gaza, but also in the Sudan and Congo, and then also the number of rapes that are occurring, and the need to have women at the table when decisions are being made, because women have a lens and have an understanding of how things impact us that a lot of times men overlook. And therefore, if there are going to be solutions that are proposed, we must include the voices of women. And to that extent, many leaders were calling for the next United Nations Secretary General to be a woman, something that has not happened yet in the 80-year history of the United Nations. And so to rethink freedom at the UN, based on all of what we are hearing from the leaders, and of course we heard from Netanyahu as well, most of the chamber walked out when he came to speak. The fact that someone accused of war crimes can freely walk into the United States of America and try to hold court at the United Nations is amazing to me. Also another felon who is doing everything within his power not to have to answer for his crimes against the Israelis themselves, and then of course now his war crimes against the Palestinians. But in the meantime, the United States of America refused to allow the Palestinians a visa to come into the country to attend the General Assembly so that they too could make their voices heard. So it is time. It is the time of women, is what Mexico's leader shared with us, to look at Barbados' blueprint to unchain climate finance. This is not about asking for favors. It's about demanding a fair deal that lets nations protect their people and protect the planet. Understanding that we all live together on this planet. We are all connected, right? And so what happens one place does have an impact in other places. And it is up to us to come together, regardless of how insurmountable the problems look, to solve them as a collective. So Better Together is meant to be more than a theme. The idea is about resetting, to share voice, to share risk, to share opportunity, to bring leaders back to the table, to operate with truth so that trust can be rebuilt. So for all of you listening, all of you watching, this is not the time to be ignorant about what's happening in your community, in your state, in your country, in your region of the world, in the world, period. This is a time for all of us to really dial in, pay attention, and to figure out what role we should all be playing to bring about freedom for everyone. Here again in Central Texas, where I'm based, the state of Texas supposedly has revamped our STAR test, but they told us a bunch of lies because there's still multiple tests that the students have to take. They're just being rebranded. You've got to follow the money to figure out who are the companies who are going to be making all the money from all of this so-called testing, right? We are in a situation in the community that I'm in with our school district where we have some schools that have been labeled as failing, and if we don't take action, we could have a situation where someone from the outside is coming in to dictate what happens with our schools, and all of us have a role to play. I'm looking forward to a conversation that will be coming soon with the acting superintendent for the Killeen Independent School District, so that we can hear a little bit more from the proverbial horse's mouth about what's happening and how we must come together. Even now, voter rolls are being purged. I encourage you, go and check your voter registration. If you haven't registered to vote, vote now. Go register now. This is the time to start paying attention to who are the candidates running. Are there positions open that you can throw your hat in the ring to run? Because we need leaders who are going to be about positive change in our community. This is the time to vet the people who say they want your vote. What have they been about? What do they stand for? What are their core values? Because if we pay attention, they tell us. Project 2025 and everything that is happening now didn't just fall out of the sky. It had been fermenting for years, but they also published it for us to read and understand. And many of us didn't, and we voted in one way, and now many of you have buyer's remorse. But we can change all of that by rethinking what we want our freedoms to look like and whether we're willing to do the work to maintain our freedoms. So thank you for watching again. If you're on the YouTube side, if you're listening on the radio, we appreciate you listening to us, sharing the word about Rethinking Freedom. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and please check the description for the Eventbrite link so that you can sign your young people up for Quantum Leap. Till next week, I'm your host, Aya Fubaranelli.